Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we really get into the stories behind the gear, the tech, the innovations that didn't just tweak things, but really fundamentally shape them. And today, yeah, we're focusing on a real icon of a guitar sound. It's this small, unassuming black box, but it unleashed this huge, aggressive voice. We're talking about the ProCo Turbo RAT distortion pedal. Now look, anyone who's messed around with guitar pedals knows the original R8. Legendary, right? But the Turbo RAT, that's its sort of snarling cousin, you could say. It popped up in the late 80s, and it was answering this real need from guitarists who just wanted, well, more.
Exactly. More grit, more power.
Yeah, a sound that can just slice through everything else happening in the band. And it pretty quickly made its own name, Not just another version, but like a cult classic.
Absolutely. It stood on its own.
So today we're going to unpack its origins, which are pretty fascinating. We'll get into the tech, the engineering that gave it that specific sound, and of course its impact, culturally, and why it ended up on the pedal boards of some really key players in rock music. Okay, let's unpack this. So let's rewind a bit. 1989, the Turbo RAT hits the scene. Now, it wasn't like built from the ground up, totally new. It came after the original RAT that was 78, and the RAT 2, which was just the year before, 88.
Right.
So it makes you wonder, doesn't it? ProCo already had these two, super successful, much-loved RAT pedals. So why bring out another one? What was missing? What was changing in music that created a gap for the Turbo RAT?
Well, what's fascinating here, and I think people sometimes miss this, is that the Turbo RAT wasn't just, let's update the model. It was a really direct response, almost urgent, you could say.
Yeah.
Because the musical landscape was shifting pretty profoundly. The original RAT, total staple.
Yeah.
Alternative punk rock guys loved it. Great distortion, that mid-range punch. Fantastic. But think about the late 80s bleeding into the 90s. Music was just getting heavier,
Right.
grittier, less polished maybe.
Yeah, you had grunge starting to bubble up.
Exactly. Grunge, harder, indie rock, even some industrial sounds creeping in. Guitarists needed something more, something that could push things further. They wanted more headroom, maybe less of that inherent compression the original had, just a raw, kind of untamed sound.
Okay.
And the Turbo RAT, well, it was basically engineered for that. Hotter output, more aggressive distortion overall, and just a different voice, to fit right into that changing rock and even metal scene. It was meeting a demand. A new generation wanted a different kind of intensity.
And it definitely looked the part, too, didn't it? It kept that same iconic vibe, almost military grade, Scream tough.
Oh,
You
yeah.
saw one, you knew it was a Riot-T. That heavy black steel box, the big knobs, simple layout, ProCo's signature thing.
Totally. It looked rugged, reliable, and any touring musician will tell you that's huge.
Yeah.
It's just as important as the sound sometimes.
Right. Built like a tank. Ready for the road. Kind of matched the sound it made, really. Aggressive box, aggressive sound.
Oh, perfectly put.
So that gets us to the real core of it, the magic. Because, from the outside, it looked so much like the others. So how did it actually get that more aggressive, hotter sound? What was the tweak? What was under the hood that gave it the turbo?
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. If we connect this to, the bigger picture of how pedals are designed, you see how these small component changes can just completely redefine the whole thing, give it a new identity.
Right.
So the Turbo RT, it definitely kept the basic RAT recipe, the op-amp clipping circuit. That's the heart of the RAT sound. And for listeners, the op-amp, that's the chip that pushes the guitar signal really hard to get that distortion. Early Turbo RTs, just like the original, they even use that LM308 op-amp that vintage gear fans go crazy for, known for its specific tone and headroom.
Ah, the famous LM308.
That's the one. But the real key, the secret sauce for the turbo part, was switching the clipping diodes. Instead of using silicon diodes, they used LEDs, light-emitting diodes.
LEDs, like the little lights.
Exactly, those little lights. But used here for how they clip the audio signal. Now, why does that matter so much? Well, silicon diodes, like in the original RAT and RT, they have a relatively low forward voltage. Basically, they start clipping the signal pretty quickly and smoothly. Gives you a nice rounded distortion, but also quite a bit of compression.
Okay, smoother.
Yeah. LEDs, though, they have a much higher forward voltage.
Yeah.
So in practical terms, they let more of the signal through before they start clipping it. And the difference in sound is immediate. It's louder, noticeably so. More open sounding, less compressed. You get more headroom, more dynamic range.
Ah, so less squashed.
Precisely. And the clipping itself has a different texture. It's harsher, maybe spikier, more angular. Definitely a rawer sound compared to the smoother, maybe more polite feel of the other RATs. It was less forgiving, maybe. More immediate punch.
Wow. So it wasn't just turning up a knob, it was actually changing how the distortion was made, fundamentally.
Fairly fundamental.
But it still had that RIT character, that tight mid-heavy thing.
Oh, yeah, it retained that family resemblance, that mid-focus the RAT is known for.
Mm.
But the LED clipping just gave it so much more cut, more presence. You could really hear it just slicing through a busy mix.
Which, like you said, was exactly what players were looking for back then.
Spot on. And when you crank the distortion, it went beyond just distortion. It could get into this really cool, almost fuzz territory, like this huge saturated wall of sound. Gave you another texture altogether.
So it really lived up to the turbo name then, just this intense, immediate kind of aggression.
Absolutely. It earned the name, no question.
Mhm.
And the controls, well, they looked familiar if you knew a RIT, but they sort of took on a new life with that extra output. The distortion knob, yeah, that went from just a bit of grit all the way to like full saturation
Right.
meltdown.
Yeah.
But the volume knob, noticeably hotter than the older RIT, loads more output available.
Ah, so you could really slam the front end of an amp.
Exactly. Perfect for pushing an already cooking tube amp way over the edge. That's part of that punch-through thing. And then there's the filter control, which anyone who's used a RET knows is a bit weird.
Yeah, it works backwards, right?
Right. Turn it
Mhm.
clockwise and you lose treble. It's a low-pass filter, basically.
Yeah.
But super useful. Let you dial in anything from like super sharp cutting lead tones to these really thick, dark, almost sledgy rhythm sounds. You could really shape that aggressive chord to fit whatever you were doing. Surprisingly versatile for such a, brutal sounding pedal sometimes.
Okay, so with a sound like that, distinctive, powerful, versatile, it makes sense that it ended up with some pretty big names, right? Guys who really
Mhm.
put it on the map.
Oh, for sure.
We always talk about Kurt Cobain and the original RT, which he definitely used.
Yeah.
But he was also known to use turbo RATs live. Maybe when he needed that extra kick, that bit more roar for a solo or a really heavy part. And think about Graham Coxon from Blur. That raw, really biting distortion sound he had. The turbo RT was often a key part of that. Gave him that sort of urgent, unpolished edge. That was his thing.
Definitely part of that Britpop sound, but with a real edge.
Yeah. And then someone totally different, like Kevin Shields from My Bloody Valentine.
Ah, the wall of sound guy.
Exactly. Now, he used all sorts of RANs, but the Turbo RT's specific character, less compressed, more open, that was perfect for building those huge, sustained, textured soundscapes. Dreamy, but also kind of abrasive. Shoegaze relied on that kind of thing.
Absolutely crucial for that texture. Or think about Matt Bellamy from Muse. He's always experimenting.
Yeah, I was tinkering.
He's famously used various ARD circuits, sometimes even built into his guitars or complex rigs, often chasing that raw, powerful, but still articulate sound for his big, heavy rock stuff. And the Turbo R DNA is definitely in there.
So it wasn't just random famous users. It feels like the pedal itself was contributing to the actual sound of those genres. Grunge, shoegaze, alt-rock, helping define them.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. It offered a specific sonic tool that let those artists push things in new directions.
Which leads to like a really interesting point. How does a piece of gear, especially one that's kind of a sequel, right, an evolution, how does it build its own legend beyond just the sound specs?
That's a great question. Because the Turbo Rack wasn't just another pedal. It hit at the right time with the right modification. It offered something players needed then. By the late 80s, early 90s, yeah, the original rack was iconic. The RAT 2 was solid. But some players, especially in those heavier scenes, were maybe finding them a bit polite, a little too smooth.
Right. They wanted something ruder.
Exactly. Less compressed, more open, just something they could really scream. And the Turbo Rack just stepped right into that gap. It became known as the aggressive RAT, almost its own category.
Ah, okay.
It arrived just as music was making that shift towards heavier, more direct, less polished sounds. Perfect timing, perfect positioning.
And that distinct identity, that definitely fuels the whole Battle the Ratas thing you see online, doesn't it?
Oh, totally. Spend 5 minutes on any guitar forum,
Yeah.
and you'll find these huge debates. People swearing by the original LM308 RAT, loving its smoothness, its compression, that vintage warmth. And then others just fiercely defending the Turbo RAT for its raw bite, its cut, its sheer volume.
It's like choosing a side.
It really is. It's almost like a philosophical choice about what kind of aggression you want,
Well,
Each side thinks theirs is the ultimate RAT.
that's amazing. Just down to those diodes, basically.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
It shows how deep musicians connect with their tools, how tiny changes create totally different experiences.
Yeah.
And then there's the other thing, the toughness.
Ah, yeah, the indestructibility
The
myth.
myth. I don't know if it's a myth. I mean, I've heard so many stories. You probably have too. These things getting dropped, thrown, abused on tour.
Aha! Yeah, you could just put off a building.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it would still work.
Yeah.
That heavy steel box wasn't just for show. It was about making it bulletproof. And for a working musician, that kind of reliability, priceless. So you've got this unique sound. Plus, it's built like a brick outhouse.
Hmm.
That combination really cemented its place.
And that ruggedness, that unique sound,
Yeah.
that definitely feeds into the whole cult classic thing. And, well, the prices you see now for the old ones.
Yeah, the vintage market.
Original turbo RATs, especially the early ones with the LM308 chip everyone wants. You're looking at, what, $250, $400? Sometimes more.
Easily. It's wild.
It's part of that whole, boutique op-amp fetishism thing, isn't it? Where specific old chips become legendary.
Collectors, tone chasers, they'll pay a premium to get that exact sound from that era.
So what does this all mean, then, for us listening or for players looking at gear now?
I think it means the Turbo RAT was way more than just another distortion pedal. It was a really specific, perfectly timed answer to a sonic need that was emerging in music. It shows how sometimes you don't need to reinvent the wheel. A really smart, targeted change to something already great can create its own icon. It's about listening to what musicians actually need, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, it's really clear the Turbo R80 had quite a journey. Started as an evolution, but totally carved out its own space, became its own icon. That snarling, uncompressed sound, thanks to those LEDs and the hotter output. It really let guitarists push into new territory, cut through those dense mixes in the late 80s, 90s.
Empowered them, really.
Yeah, from grunge's raw energy to shoegaze's layered walls and just that heavier alt-rock sound, the Turbo RAT's fingerprint is all over it. It's definitely one of the most important high-gain pedals of that whole modern era.
No doubt about it. And maybe, as you think about its legacy, here's something to chew on. Sometimes real innovation doesn't come from starting completely fresh with a blank page. Sometimes it's about having the guts to make a really focused, maybe even audacious, change to something that's already a classic. Think about it, changing one key component type, LEDs instead of silicon. It didn't just tweak the Turbo RAT, it fundamentally changed its whole personality. And that opened up completely new ways for a generation of musicians to express themselves. It just goes to show, sometimes a small, clever change can really spark a whole sonic revolution.
That's a great way to put it, a surgical strike on a classic.
Yeah.
So next time you're listening back to some tracks from that era, grunge, shoegaze, whatever, listen out, you might just hear that distinctive, untamed Turbo RA roar cutting through. Or hey, if you play guitar, maybe now's the time to jump into those forums and pick your side in the great RA debate. Thanks so much for joining us on The Deep Dive. We'll catch you next time to explore another fascinating story.